Have you ever poured gallons of water onto your vegetable garden, expecting a massive, juicy harvest, only to end up with yellow leaves, cracked fruit, and a lot of disappointment? What if I told you that giving your plants more water is actually the fastest way to ruin them? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into the ultimate mystery of the summer garden. We are talking about exactly when and how often you should be watering your tomatoes. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will discover that almost everything you thought you knew about hydrating your plants is completely backwards. We are going to expose the hidden mistakes that are secretly sabotaging your harvest right now. Get ready, because the truth about perfect tomatoes is completely counterintuitive, and it will change the way you garden forever. Tell me in the comments right now, do you water your plants every single day? Let us see how many of you are making the ultimate gardening mistake. Before we fix your watering habits, we need to understand exactly where these amazing plants come from. Tomatoes did not originate in a swamp or a rainforest. They actually trace their ancient roots back to the dry, mountainous regions of western South America. In their natural, wild habitat, they had to survive in well-draining soil with infrequent rainfall. They evolved to send their roots deep into the earth to search for hidden moisture, rather than waiting for a daily puddle on the surface. When we bring them into our modern backyards and drown them in tap water every single afternoon, we are literally going against thousands of years of natural evolution. They hate having wet feet. Understanding this vital piece of history is the key to unlocking their full potential. They thrive on a cycle of deep hydration followed by a period of slight stress. Now that you know their origin story, let us break down the exact mistakes you need to avoid. Let us start with the absolute most common dilemma, which is the actual time of day you choose to hydrate your plants. Many people think that giving plants a drink whenever they look thirsty is fine, but that is a massive mistake. The absolute best time to water your tomato plants is early in the morning. Why is this so crucial? Imagine waking up and having a tall, refreshing glass of water before you start a hard day of physical work under the hot sun. Your plants need exactly the same thing. By watering early, usually between 6 and 8 in the morning, you give the roots plenty of time to absorb the moisture before the intense heat of the midday sun hits them. This prepares the plant to handle the heavy stress of the day. Now, let us bust a popular myth right here. Some folks believe that watering in the morning will cause the water droplets to act like tiny magnifying glasses, burning the leaves under the sun. This is completely false. Physics just does not work that way in your garden. The real magic of morning watering is that any water that accidentally gets on the leaves has the entire day to dry off in the breeze. Dry leaves mean a healthy plant, while wet leaves are an open invitation for nasty fungal diseases to move in and destroy your hard work. So, if you want a vibrant, healthy garden, set your alarm clock a little earlier and make morning watering your new, unbreakable gardening habit. Now that we know morning is best, we need to talk about the absolute worst time to reach for that garden hose. Watering your tomatoes late in the evening or at night is a recipe for total disaster. I know it is tempting. You come home from a long day at work, the sun is setting, the air is cooling down, and it feels like a nice, relaxing time to stand in the yard. But you are secretly creating a nightmare for your plants. When you water at night, the temperature drops, and there is no sunlight to evaporate the excess moisture. This means your plants are sitting in damp, soggy soil all night long. Imagine going to sleep wearing wet socks. It is uncomfortable, cold, and it breeds bacteria. That is exactly what happens to your tomatoes. This nighttime dampness creates the absolute perfect environment for fungal diseases like blight and powdery mildew to explode. Furthermore, wet soil in the dark is a giant flashing neon sign inviting slugs and snails to come and feast on your precious crop. A great illustration of this is leaving a wet kitchen sponge in a dark, cool corner. By the next day, it smells terrible and is full of bacteria. Do not treat your garden like a dirty kitchen sponge. If you absolutely must water later in the day, do it late in the afternoon while there is still enough sunlight and breeze to completely dry the surface of the soil before the sun goes down. This brings us to a mechanical mistake that almost every beginner makes without even realizing it. I am talking about overhead watering. Standing above your plants and raining water down over the top of the leaves might look natural, like a rainstorm, but it is highly destructive. Tomatoes despise having wet leaves. It is one of their biggest weaknesses. When you shower them from above, you are splashing soil up onto the lower branches. That soil is filled with dormant spores of various diseases. When those spores hit the wet leaves, they activate, and within a week, your plant is turning brown and dying. A vivid example of this would be trying to drink a glass of water by pouring it over your head. It makes a huge mess, and you barely get anything to drink. Your tomatoes drink through their roots, not their leaves. The goal is to deliver the moisture directly to the soil level, right at the base of the plant. You want to use a watering wand, a drip line, or simply hold the hose low to the ground. Let us completely debunk the myth that plants need their leaves washed to breathe better. Unless you live in an incredibly dusty industrial area, rain will take care of cleaning the leaves. Your only job is to soak the dirt. Keep the foliage completely dry, and you will instantly eliminate 50% of the disease problems in your vegetable garden. Let us discuss the deadly sin of loving your plants a little too much. Overwatering is the #1 killer of homegrown tomatoes. People see a slight droop and immediately panic, rushing out with buckets of water. But here is the shocking truth. Overwatering actually produces the exact same physical symptoms as underwatering. When you drown the roots, you fill up all the tiny air pockets in the soil. Roots need oxygen just as much as they need water. Without oxygen, the roots suffocate and begin to rot. Once they rot, they can no longer transport water up the stem. So, ironically, a drowning plant will wilt and look incredibly thirsty. The leaves will start to turn a sickly, pale yellow, starting from the bottom of the plant and moving upwards. Think of it like a person who has eaten way too much food at a buffet. They feel sluggish, sick, and they definitely do not want more food. An overwatered tomato plant is choking. If you notice the leaves turning yellow and feeling soft and mushy, stop watering immediately. Let the soil completely dry out. We need to shatter the illusion that bigger, fatter tomatoes require a constant swamp of water. The best tomatoes are actually grown on the edge of thirst. Too much water will dilute the flavor of the fruit, giving you giant, watery tomatoes that taste like absolutely nothing. Treat them mean to keep them keen. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the severe dangers of underwatering. While tomatoes like a little bit of stress, leaving them completely parched for weeks will destroy your harvest just as quickly. When a tomato plant lacks water for an extended period, it goes into pure survival mode. It will literally stop growing, drop its blossoms, and refuse to set any new fruit. The plant decides that it cannot support babies if it is fighting for its own life. The symptoms of severe underwatering are very clear. The leaves will not just wilt, they will become crispy, dry, and brittle to the touch. The edges of the leaves might turn brown and curl upwards in a desperate attempt to conserve moisture. A great way to picture this is running a marathon in the desert without a water bottle. Your body starts shutting down non-essential functions to keep your core alive. Your plant does the exact same thing. It sacrifices the tomatoes to save the main stem. A massive myth here is that plants will easily bounce back from severe wilting without any consequences. While the leaves might perk up after a heavy rain, the hidden damage is already done. The delicate root hairs die off during a severe drought, and the plant has to waste vital energy regrowing them instead of making fruit. Consistent, deep moisture is the secret to keeping the plant in a state of continuous, happy production. So how do you actually know when it is time to turn on the hose? You need to stop guessing and start using the ultimate, completely free moisture meter that you already own. I am talking about your index finger. This is called the finger test, and it is the only foolproof way to know what is happening underground. Never, ever judge the moisture of your garden by just looking at the surface of the soil. The sun and wind will quickly dry out the top half-inch of dirt, making it look like a desert, while just below the surface, it could be a muddy swamp. Here is exactly what you need to do. Push your index finger into the soil near the base of the plant, right up to your second knuckle. That is about 2 to 3 inches deep. If it feels cool, damp, and dirt sticks to your skin when you pull it out, do not water. Walk away. The plant has plenty of moisture. If your finger comes out completely clean and the soil feels warm and dusty, it is time to give them a deep soak. Think of this like baking a cake. You do not just look at the crust to see if it is done. You poke a toothpick into the middle. The finger test is your garden toothpick. It completely destroys the myth that you need expensive electronic moisture meters to grow good food. Your own sense of touch is far more accurate and will save you from making disastrous watering decisions based purely on visual guesswork. Let us talk about the secret weapon that professional gardeners use to cut their watering time in half. If you are watering your bare dirt directly under the hot sun, you are wasting your time and your money. You absolutely must use mulch. Mulch is simply a protective layer of organic materials spread over the surface of the soil around your plants. You can use straw, shredded leaves, untreated grass clippings, or wood chips. When you leave the soil naked and exposed to the summer sun, the moisture evaporates incredibly fast. Furthermore, the top layer of dirt bakes into a hard crust, which causes water to run off instead of sinking in. Putting down a 3-inch layer of mulch is like putting a heavy lid on a boiling pot of water. It traps the moisture inside, keeping the soil cool and damp for days. A fantastic illustration of this is stepping into a thick forest on a hot summer day. Under the canopy and beneath the fallen leaves on the forest floor, the earth is always rich and moist, even during a drought. Mulching mimics this natural forest floor. It also suppresses weeds, which steal water from your tomatoes. The myth that mulch attracts pests is mostly an exaggeration. While it can provide hiding spots, the massive benefits of water retention and temperature control far outweigh the risks. If you are not mulching your tomatoes, you are working way harder than you need to. Now we arrive at a truly heartbreaking problem that is directly caused by poor watering habits. Have you ever grown a beautiful, massive tomato only to turn it over and find a nasty, black, sunken, rotting hole on the bottom? This is called blossom end rot, and it makes gardeners want to cry. Most people rush to the store to buy expensive calcium sprays, thinking the soil is broken. But the truth is, your soil likely has plenty of calcium. The real culprit is inconsistent watering. Calcium is a large nutrient, and it can only be transported through the plant via a steady flow of water. If you let the soil bone dry out and then suddenly flood it with gallons of water, the plant experiences a panic. The water rushes up the stem too fast, leaving the heavy calcium behind. Without calcium, the bottom of the fruit literally collapses and rots. Imagine trying to drink a thick milkshake through a very tiny straw. If you pull too hard, the straw collapses. That is what happens to the cells in the tomato. To prevent blossom end rot, you must completely stop the roller coaster watering cycle. You cannot let the plants suffer in a drought and then drown them as an apology. Consistent, even moisture is the only way to ensure the calcium makes its way all the way up into the developing fruit. Steady watering is the ultimate cure. Here is a profound mistake that dictates the entire future of your plant. Are you a shallow waterer or a deep waterer? Most beginners grab the hose, spray the garden for 60 seconds until the top looks wet, and move on. This is called shallow watering, and it is terrible for your plants. When you only wet the top inch of the soil, you are training the tomato roots to stay right at the surface where the water is. Roots are like lazy teenagers. They will only go where the resources are easiest to find. But surface roots are incredibly vulnerable. The moment a hot day arrives, the surface dries out, and your shallow-rooted plant collapses instantly. You need to train your roots to dive deep into the earth. To do this, you must water deeply and less frequently. When you water, you want to leave the hose running on a slow trickle at the base of the plant for 20 to 30 minutes. Let the water soak down a foot or more into the soil. Then, do not water again for several days. This forces the roots to stretch downward, searching for the deep water reserves. A great example is training a dog. If you always feed the dog on the porch, it will never explore the yard. If you hide the food, the dog learns to hunt. Make your tomato roots hunt for the water. Deep root systems create massive, resilient plants that can easily survive a summer heat wave. We need to make a massive distinction right now between plants growing in the ground and plants growing in containers or pots. If you try to use the same watering schedule for both, you will fail completely. Tomatoes grown in pots are completely trapped. Their roots cannot go searching for underground water. They are 100% reliant on you. Because pots are exposed to the air on all sides, the soil inside them heats up and dries out infinitely faster than garden soil. During the peak of summer, a large tomato plant in a black plastic pot might need to be watered twice a day just to survive. The biggest mistake here is watering a container until the surface looks wet and then stopping. You must water a potted tomato until a steady stream of water is pouring out of the drainage holes in the bottom. This ensures the entire root ball is saturated. Think of a potted plant like a dry sponge in a cup. If you only put a tablespoon of water on top, the bottom of the sponge stays completely dry. You have to flood it to soak it through. And let us bust a dangerous myth. Adding rocks to the bottom of your pots does not improve drainage. It actually raises the water table inside the pot, keeping the roots dangerously soggy. Fill your pots entirely with high-quality potting mix. Ensure there are big holes in the bottom, and water until it heavily overflows. Let us rewind back to the very beginning of the season. How you water your tomatoes on the exact day you plant them in the garden sets the tone for their entire life. Transplanting is incredibly traumatic for a plant. It is being ripped from a comfortable, small pot and shoved into the harsh, foreign environment of your garden bed. This is called transplant shock. The biggest mistake you can make is planting the tomato, lightly sprinkling it with water, and walking away. When you dig the hole for your new tomato plant, you should actually fill that empty hole completely with water before you even put the plant inside. Let that water drain into the surrounding soil. Then, place the plant, cover it with dirt, and soak it heavily again from the top. You are trying to blend the moisture of the root ball with the moisture of the new soil. If you do not do this, the surrounding dry dirt will literally act like a vampire, sucking all the moisture out of the tiny root ball, killing the plant in hours. Imagine moving to a brand new country where you do not speak the language. You would want a welcoming environment and an immediate hot meal to feel safe. Flooding the planting hole is the equivalent of a warm welcome. It eliminates air pockets around the roots and encourages them to instantly start expanding into their new home. This brings us to a topic that very few people consider, which is the actual quality and type of water you are giving your plants. Not all water is created equal. The vast majority of us simply attach a hose to the side of the house and blast the garden with city tap water. While tomatoes are tough, tap water is heavily treated with chlorine and sometimes chloramine to kill bacteria for human safety. However, the soil in your garden is alive. It is packed with beneficial microbes and fungi that help feed your tomato plants. Pumping chlorinated water onto the soil can slowly damage this delicate microbial ecosystem. Now, I am not saying tap water will instantly kill your tomatoes. It will not. But if you want a truly spectacular professional-level harvest, rainwater is the absolute gold standard. Rainwater is soft, slightly acidic, and contains atmospheric nitrogen, which acts as a mild natural fertilizer. It is literally what the plants evolved to drink. An amazing illustration is the difference between drinking heavily chlorinated swimming pool water versus fresh, cold spring water. One keeps you alive, but the other actually nourishes you. If you must use tap water and want to go the extra mile, fill up large buckets or watering cans and let them sit uncovered in the sun for 24 hours before watering. This allows the chlorine gas to naturally evaporate out of the water, making it much gentler on your living soil. We need to address the absolute emergency situation of a severe summer heat wave. When temperatures soar above 95 degrees Fahrenheit for several days in a row, the normal rules of watering go completely out the window. Your tomato plants are going to be fighting for their lives. The mistake most people make is sticking to their regular schedule, thinking every third day is still enough. During a heat wave, the evaporation rate is extreme. You must become highly vigilant. You may need to water deeply every single morning just to keep up with the loss. However, you must also avoid the trap of drowning them out of panic. Check the soil with your finger twice a day. If a heat wave is predicted, the absolute best thing you can do is give the garden a massive, deep soaking the day before the heat arrives. You want to charge the soil battery with moisture before the sun starts stealing it. Think of it like drinking a huge amount of water the night before a grueling hike, rather than trying to chug it while you are already sweating on the mountain. Additionally, consider hanging a temporary shade cloth over your plants during the hottest part of the afternoon. Reducing the solar radiation directly reduces the amount of water the plant sweats out, saving you water and saving the plant from total exhaustion. Let us talk about a subtle mistake involving water pressure that can ruin your entire crop. When you are standing there holding the hose, how fast is the water coming out? If you have the nozzle set to a hard, aggressive jet stream, you are causing invisible damage. Blasting the soil at the base of the plant causes a tremendous amount of mud and debris to splash upwards onto the stem and the lower leaves. As we discussed earlier, soil splashed onto leaves is the primary way that early blight and septoria leaf spot infect your tomatoes. You are literally firing disease bullets at your own plants. You must use a gentle setting, like the shower or soaker function. The water should gently flow onto the earth without displacing the dirt. A great visual is trying to fill a coffee cup with a high-pressure fire hose. You will just blast the cup out of your hand and make a mess. You need a gentle pour. To further protect your plants from splashing, it is highly recommended to prune off the bottom 12 inches of branches and leaves from your mature tomato plants. By creating a gap between the soil and the first set of leaves, you drastically reduce the chance of muddy water reaching the foliage, even during a heavy rainstorm. Gentle watering combined with bottom pruning is a professional secret for disease-free gardening. If you are truly serious about growing massive amounts of tomatoes, and you are tired of standing in the sun holding a hose, you need to graduate to the ultimate watering system. I am talking about drip irrigation. Hand watering is fine for a few plants, but it is notoriously uneven. Drip irrigation changes everything. It is a system of flexible plastic tubing with tiny holes or emitters that you lay directly on the soil under your mulch. When you turn it on, it slowly drips water exactly where the plant needs it, right at the root zone. There is zero evaporation, zero splashing, and zero wet leaves. It is the most efficient use of water possible. Imagine the difference between taking an intravenous drip at the hospital versus having someone throw a bucket of water in your face. The slow drip allows the soil to act like a giant sponge, absorbing every single drop without any wasteful runoff. The myth that drip systems are too expensive or too complicated for a home gardener is completely outdated. You can buy cheap, simple kits that hook right up to your outdoor faucet and take an hour to install. By putting your drip system on a battery-powered timer, you can literally go on vacation for a week in the middle of July and come back to a perfectly watered, thriving jungle of tomatoes. It is the ultimate gardening hack. This next point is a closely guarded secret among competition tomato growers, and it involves knowing when to actually stop watering. As we near the end of the season, your plants will be loaded with big, green tomatoes that are just starting to turn red. This is the ripening phase. The biggest mistake you can make right now is to keep heavily watering the plants. If you pump the plant full of water while the fruit is blushing, the tomato will swell up rapidly. This causes two massive problems. First, the skin cannot stretch fast enough, causing those ugly, deep cracks and splits across the top of the tomato, which invite bugs and rot. Second, all that excess water heavily dilutes the natural sugars and acids inside the fruit. You end up with a huge tomato that tastes completely bland and watery. To get that intense, concentrated, sweet, rich tomato flavor that we all crave, you need to intentionally cut back on watering by about 50% during the final ripening stage. You want to stress the plant just a tiny bit. Think of it like making a rich stew or a soup. If you add too much water at the very end, you ruin the flavor. You want it to simmer down and concentrate. By backing off the water, you force the plant to pack all of its energy and sugars directly into the fruit. This is the true secret to growing the best-tasting tomato in your neighborhood. We need to completely destroy the myth of the daily sprinkle. So many well-meaning gardeners go out every single evening with a little watering can and give each tomato plant a tiny splash of water. They think they are being kind and providing a daily refreshment. This is actually one of the most destructive habits you can form. As we covered, shallow watering creates shallow roots. But a daily sprinkle does something even worse. It creates an environment of constant, never-ending surface dampness. The top layer of soil never gets a chance to breathe or dry out. This constant moisture is the perfect breeding ground for fungus gnats, mold, and soil-borne diseases. Your plants do not want to be teased with a sip of water every day. They want a massive, soaking drink, and then they want to be left entirely alone to digest it. A perfect example is human eating habits. It is much healthier to eat 3 solid, nutritious meals a day rather than constantly snacking on tiny pieces of junk food every 10 minutes. The daily sprinkle is the junk food diet for your garden. Break the habit. Switch to a schedule of deep soaking every 3 to 4 days, depending on your weather. Your plants will reward you with explosive growth and a much stronger immune system. One size does not fit all when it comes to watering, because not all dirt is the same. You must adjust your watering habits based on your specific soil type. If you do not know what kind of soil you have, you are flying blind. Broadly speaking, there are 2 extremes: sandy soil and clay soil. If you have sandy soil, water pours through it almost instantly. It drains beautifully, but it holds zero moisture. If you garden in sand, you will have to water much more frequently, perhaps every 2 days, because the water disappears so fast. On the other hand, if you have heavy clay soil, it acts exactly like a ceramic bowl. When you water clay, it takes a long time to absorb, but once it is wet, it stays wet for a very long time. If you water heavy clay every 2 days, you will absolutely drown your tomatoes in a puddle of mud. Think of pouring water through a kitchen strainer versus pouring it onto a thick sponge. You have to treat them differently. The myth here is that potting soil behaves like garden soil. It does not. You must do the finger test specifically to learn how your unique soil behaves. Amending your garden with rich compost is the ultimate equalizer. Compost helps sandy soil hold water, and it helps clay soil drain better, creating the perfect middle ground for your tomatoes. Here is a fascinating scientific detail that most people completely ignore: the actual temperature of the water you are putting on your plants. Imagine it is a blazing hot summer day, 90 degrees outside. Your tomato plant is hot, the soil is hot, the roots are hot. Suddenly, you turn on the hose and blast the base of the plant with ice-cold water that has been sitting deep underground in the city pipes. That sudden, extreme drop in temperature literally sends the root system into a state of severe thermal shock. The roots will physically retract and temporarily stop taking up moisture and nutrients. It stunts the growth of the plant for several hours until the soil warms back up. A brilliant illustration of this is jumping straight into a freezing cold ice bath when you are sweating and hot. It takes your breath away and your body seizes up. Your tomatoes experience the exact same shock. If you are using a hose, try to let it run for a moment to clear out the coldest water. Even better, as mentioned before, filling rain barrels or large buckets and letting the water sit in the ambient air temperature ensures that the water is the exact same temperature as the soil. Watering with tepid, sun-warmed water is a gentle, comforting experience for the root system that encourages continuous, uninterrupted growth. Finally, we must talk about reading your plant's body language, specifically the terrifying afternoon droop. Every gardener has experienced this. You walk out at 3 in the afternoon on a hot day in July, and your tomato plants look terrible. The top leaves are drooping severely, and the plant looks like it is dying of thirst. Panic sets in, and you run for the hose. Stop right there. This is completely normal and is an amazing natural defense mechanism. During the peak heat of the day, a large tomato plant is actually losing moisture through its leaves faster than its roots can suck it up from the soil. To protect itself from severe dehydration, the plant intentionally wilts. By drooping its leaves, it reduces the surface area exposed to the direct sun, essentially hiding from the heat. It is exactly like a human sweating and seeking shade to cool down. It does not necessarily mean the soil is dry. The biggest mistake is watering a plant that is only experiencing temporary heat stress. If the soil is still damp from your finger test, do not add more water. Wait until the sun starts to go down. As the air cools in the evening, the plant will magically perk right back up and look perfectly healthy again. Only water if the plant is still severely wilted the next morning before the sun gets hot. Learning the difference between a natural heat droop and true thirst will save you from constantly overwatering. So there you have it, the ultimate truth about hydrating your summer garden. We have covered a lot of ground today, and the main takeaway is profound. The secret to massive, flavorful tomatoes is not endless amounts of water. It is about strategic hydration. Remember, deep and infrequent watering builds massive root systems. Morning is the only time you should be wetting your garden. Keep those leaves perfectly dry to banish disease, And use the simple finger test before you ever turn on that hose. When you stop drowning your plants and start giving them the perfect balance of moisture and slight stress, they will reward you by concentrating all their energy into producing the sweetest, juiciest tomatoes you have ever tasted. It is time to ditch the daily sprinkle and start watering like a professional. I want to thank you so much for watching and learning with us today. If this video helped you solve a mystery in your garden, please hit that like button right now. It truly helps the channel grow. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our weekly gardening secrets. Now, I have a question for you. What is the absolute biggest struggle you face when growing tomatoes in your yard? Let me know down in the comments and I will do my best to answer you. Happy gardening, and I will see you in the next video.